Hi there. We talked to Kathleen Korpela today, and we discussed the often overlooked challenges faced by family caregivers, especially for those who are in the sandwich generation, which I think a lot of us are right there. And Kathleen shares her personal journey as a caregiver for her father, which really motivated her to dedicate her practice to educate and empower family caregivers caring for aging loved ones. We talked about the importance of effective communication, self-advocacy, and setting boundaries. And also, one of my favorite things is we talked about the importance of using our leadership capability in our jobs to apply that in this family situation. I cannot wait to present this episode to you. It's a must listen. So let's dive right in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Soft Project. And I have a beautiful guest with me today. It's Kathleen Korpela, and she's a founder and head coach of Living Golden Well. And she is here to coach and empower family caregivers on how to care for aging loved ones. And it's such an incredibly important topic, and I have so much I wanted to ask you. And I think this is a topic that it needs to become a norm. I think we talked about this in our chat. There are so much out there to teach younger moms how to be a parent, or parents just to, parenting books, parenting resources, but there are not enough resources that talk about how to prep us to care for aging parents.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you so much, Sherry, for having me. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here and have this conversation with you. I would agree with you. I think, the topic of stepping into support aging parents and navigating the world of elder care needs to be talked about a lot more. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that you're doing this, you're helping, I mean, I wouldn't say women, but I think a lot of caregivers do fall on women. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of start with your personal journey of how you why do you wanted to start this and really empowered us to become a much better caregivers?
Yeah. So I have a personal caregiving journey story, and that really was kind of the genesis for my entrepreneurial story and
Uh-huh.
starting my practice of living golden well and serving women. So I was a sandwich generation family caregiver for my father, who had Alzheimer's dementia. And I was caring for him for almost 8 years. I was one of his primary caregivers. And I just in case for some of maybe your listeners that don't know, sandwich generation is a term when you're simultaneously caring for both an aging parent and you're raising a family and caring for kids too. And so that was me. And I found myself, in that situation upon his dementia diagnosis. And that is really what catapulted me into becoming a caregiver.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I think when, people find themselves in the situation of caring for an aging parent, it either sort of finds them gradually or it finds them suddenly,
Yeah.
through an unexpected emergency or a crisis or a very serious diagnosis, a hospitalization, a fall. And it's very, very unnerving because it catapults you into this world and essentially a life stage that you don't have any experience in before. And I didn't at the time, like so many people, I didn't have really any support or guidance for kind of stepping into this new role, taking on this new responsibility, navigating the identity shift that comes with sort of transitioning from your role as adult child to parenting your parent. And so it was a very lonely place to be as
Mm-hmm.
well. I didn't, caring for someone can be very lonely and isolating, and it sometimes can feel like you're the only one going through it, even though you're not. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have other women like myself that I could really relate to and feel
Mm-hmm.
seen and heard and supported. And I remember at the time I had joined an Alzheimer's Association support group,
Mm.
um, which was somewhat helpful. But really, the common denominator for all of the people was
Mm.
that we had a loved one with dementia.
Yeah.
But within that group, there wasn't anyone that was a working mom
Yeah.
with a professional career,
Right.
and juggling all of these other competing demands on their time. And so that's what I mean when there just wasn't anyone that I could really relate to that really
Mm-hmm.
looked like me, that really had the other sort of life components happening at the same time. And so it really was a lonely and isolating place to be. I really realized through the experience how little support there is out there
Yeah.
for caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
And after my dad's passing, my dad passed away last year, I did a lot of reflecting as part of that kind of grieving
Mm.
process. And I realized I really wanted to take more meaningful action against my passion for helping women and being in service of women. Because so much in my corporate career, I worked in, very demanding corporate environments at the intersection of business and technology, very male dominated,
Yes.
and it wasn't fulfilling for me. And so I made the leap from the corporate world into entrepreneurship and founded Living Golden Well, coaching and consulting practice,
Mm-hmm.
supporting family caregivers. And I focus really on women and preparing women for navigating elder care and caring for aging parents. And so I created my practice and the program that I run to fill really a badly needed gap in our world and in our market today. And, the mission of my business and what I do is to transform the caregiving experience through education and through empowerment so that women can better care for their
Right.
aging parent and better care for themselves through that
Mm-hmm.
experience and that life stage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And you mentioned the support group that you don't find anyone that's similar to your positions. I mean, what were they like, the people that joined the support group?
they come from all walks of life, all life stages. And some of them were spouses caring for, their spouse. And so really all walks of life, all socioeconomic backgrounds, much older than me at the time. Being a sandwich generation caregiver is very hard. And, there are people in their, mid to late 30s that step into helping support their parent, and navigating the logistical and administrative and care requirements that come with that. And so it was really a mix also of men and women, of gender as well. And again, the common denominator was that we all had a loved one with dementia, but there wasn't really a lot of in-depth, deep, true, intimate dialogue and discussion around the challenges I think that are sometimes and the experiences that are unique to women, and how we might be grappling with advocating for ourselves in the workplace as both a working mom and a working caregiver. And so it just wasn't really delving, I think, into the depth of topics that I really needed to be touching
Yeah.
on.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I think that's so interesting because if we look at our parents' generation, the spouse taking care of each other, that was kind of the norm, right? And a lot of women
right.
back then, they were stay home, they're housewives. and
That's right.
they care for their husband and vice versa.
It was expected
And
as part of the traditional
right.
roles.
Yeah, but I think I think we're the same age actually. I'm 42 and we are in the same generation where the career was really important for us. In our 20s, we never think about caring for aging parents. We think about our career, how do we advance, how do we compete? So it's such a surprise to us. And I think actually for a lot of people now, for a lot of women, that this is something we actually really needed to consider. But I think what you're doing is so incredible is that you're allowing us to feel more curious about it
Mm,
and to know how to be more proactive. So it's not pushed and not forced on us, right? Like
yeah.
you said, a lot of times you just suddenly find yourself in that situation and you have to pivot really quickly. And
Yeah, that's right.
like you yourself, I think you mentioned that you were on maternity leave during that time, right?
I was actually a week away from going back
Mm,
to work after my second maternity leave. Yeah, when we, received my father's diagnosis. But, sort of during the time I was on my second maternity leave, I'd had my son. There were things that happened, sort of warning signs and signals that were really red flags to me. But once again, I didn't have the knowledge.
yeah.
I didn't know what to look for. And I think is so typical of people is sort of like, oh, that's mom or dad's forgetfulness. Right? We
Mm,
can sometimes just brush it off as normal aging,
hmm.
getting older. It's okay. But sometimes there's that thing in the back part of our little head, right? That's sort
Right.
of like, is
Hmm.
there something more to this? I don't know if I'm ready for that. Right. And so sometimes that deep kind of denial can come in, and that
Mm,
denial can be sort of mixed with that fear and uncertainty because we just don't know, right? And I think had I had more knowledge around at the time, more knowledge around how to broach conversations with my dad about incidents and use those as a way to parlay into conversations and discussions with him around what he wants, like his desires, his wishes for, when he can increasingly no longer care for himself, we would have been much better prepared as a family to sort of take on this sort of big responsibility that came our way.
hmm. I don't know if you're willing to share some of the personal story, but if you're not, it's totally fine. But I'm just really curious as to, what are the things that you kind of wanted to ignore? Because again, like you're talking about the denial, and I think that is so true because I think we feel like, oh, we're young, we're caring for our babies, or we're young, we're in a peak of our career. We don't want to. Also, we don't think we're ready for that. So I don't want to think about that, right? So what are
Yes.
the things that you think that you were in denial of? And if you could go back in years ago, 8 years ago, then what would you tell yourself?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. So, one was I'll just kind of share a personal story that was sort of a red flag for me at the time. My son's name is Nico. We had had my son, and then I was coordinating with my dad to have him meet us at home after we got home from the hospital. And my dad is usually a pretty punctual person. He was a very punctual
Mm,
person. And we got home the next day from the hospital, and I think we had arranged to meet at like 12 noon or something. And we show up, and he's in the driveway, and it turns out he had been there for 3 hours waiting for us. And that took me as a surprise because it was a behavior that was out of character for my dad. He was actually, and I thought, well, and he was sort of like, "Oh, hi honey, so great to see you and meet the baby." And I was like, "You've been here
mm,
for 3 hours." Like it was just very uncharacteristic behavior. And so again, it was sort of red flag, but okay, what do you kind of do with that? And then a couple of weeks later, I was on a walk with my son, and I called up my dad, and we were talking, and he goes, "Oh, how's it going? And how is your son again? What's his name?" And
Mm,
he'd forgotten his own grandson's name. And I was like, "It's Nico, Dad. It's Nico."
mhm,
And
mhm,
once again, I was like, like grandparents don't forget their brand new grandson's name. And so it was little kind of things like that. So you know your parents well, right? You know them best. It's when there start to be confusion around time and place, maybe confusion with instructions, getting lost driving, forgetting your grandson's name, right?
mhm.
It's little indicators like that. But sometimes we don't always know what to do with the information or really how to have a conversation, right, with our
Mm,
parent about that too. And maybe
right.
about, getting an assessment, for cognitive decline. So that's just a couple of sort of, these behaviors that are out of character that can kind of be like, okay, that's definitely different.
Yeah, right. And I mean, knowing what you know now, how would you actually approached one of the situations and how to, perhaps actually reached out and get him an assessment? Or, yeah, how do you actually approach that?
Yeah. Well, sometimes one way to approach it is um, opening up a dialogue like earlier rather than later so that
Mm-hmm.
it can really be framed as an ongoing conversation
Mm-hmm.
and not necessarily reactive to that particular moment. Because
Mm,
sometimes our parents can also be in denial themselves about what's happening, right? Or they try to hide things. They want to remain independent.
yeah.
Absolutely, right? And and maintain kind of their dignity in that way. And so what I would have done and what I work with my program members and what we sometimes talk through is how to approach these conversations. And sometimes just opening it up with a question of asking them, what do they envision for their future, right? As their needs start to increase and their abilities start to decline. And the more that we can open it up as a dialogue and
Mm-hmm.
continue that, because sometimes at first, when you broach the topic, they can be maybe closed off to it or in denial, or, they've maybe been putting it off themselves. And so it's good to kind of broach the conversation maybe
Mm-hmm.
over multiple moments or opportunities. The other thing too is to share on other people's stories, maybe or what happened. If you have a friend who is going through something with their parent, you're catching up with your mom or dad and you're sharing on what's going on in your life. You can talk about your friend, what's happening with their parent, and parlay that into hey, let's talk about your situation. Like, what do you want to do here? Like, what have you thought about?
Mm,
Do you have plans in place? Do you have long-term care insurance? Have you thought about what you'd like for long-term care? And just having that dialogue is very, very helpful. And the earlier that you can have that, the better,
mm,
because plans for, long-term care can take a long time to come together.
yeah.
And you don't want to be reacting to an emergency or a crisis in these situations because, putting your estate documents together takes time. There's long wait lists for assisted living facilities, memory care facilities, and other considerations that you need to think about. So, for example, if your parents are both still alive, both still married, and maybe one of them starts to decline and become more dependent, how can they remain together, but one of them
Mm,
still continue to receive the care and help that they need? So that takes planning,
oh, yeah.
as well.
Absolutely. And I think what you mentioned about the long-term communication and the conversation, that's a really important thing. And I feel like I definitely failed a couple times trying to bring up that conversation with my dad. My dad is 85, 86. So definitely he's very healthy, but also at the same time, I wanted to have that conversation with him. But sometimes, because maybe it was coming from my own fear, that I go, "Hey, Dad, what's going to happen if this happened? What would you want to do if this happens?" And I think that can be very jarring for him
Yeah,
as well. And if he wanted to, he doesn't want to lose face and he wants to be
that's
independent.
right.
He is independent, but he knows that that may come, but he doesn't want it to, he's in denial.
Yes.
Um, what sort of way to open that topic? Maybe it's a tone of voice, maybe it's just the wording itself, or maybe it's a mindset, or maybe it's everything. Like, how would you suggest someone to actually broach that conversation and keep it open as well?
Yeah, yeah. It can definitely be a mindset thing and a tone and and sort of that tone and delivery too.
Yeah.
Hearing what they have to say, even if they're, kind of in denial and shutting down about it, can be tough to kind of open that up. There can be, maybe sharing stories on what's happening with other people in your life, or
Mm,
maybe something you've read about. Or the other thing we talk about too, and why it's so important for us to be educated, is so that we can share on options and information for our parents. And so it doesn't always have to start with a question of, what do you want, Dad? Because sometimes our parents don't know, right? They don't really have that clarity. But when we open the conversation with them, at least if we're not getting clear, straight, decisive answers, which is very rare, that's why you have to sort of make it this dialogue over time, we can
mm,
plant the seed in them.
mm,
And that's a gift that we can give them. We can plant the seed. And that's another reason why it's important to be educated around, for example, options for care and living arrangements. In home care, assisted living facilities, memory care facilities, continuing care retirement facilities, independent living facilities. There's so many out there.
mm,
And if we have some of that knowledge and information around options, we can have more of a discussion or a dialogue with our parent, even if it means we're doing maybe more of the talking, than they are too.
mm. Yeah.
The other thing too is, and this is a little bit reactive, but absolutely, there's all types of challenging situations with parents who are in denial. But if your parent has a hospitalization or they have a fall, that can be an opportunity to broach the conversation about, hey, if this happens again,
Mm,
what do we do? What do you want to, where do we go from here? So using
mm,
some sort of an event, even though that is
mm.
reactive, can actually wake them up a little bit, right? There's still feelings of maybe denial, maintaining dignity and saving face,
Right.
but sometimes it can almost scare them into wanting to, have more of this dialogue because it's becoming a little bit
Mm,
more real for them too.
mm. And I am guessing it's going to be really important for them to feel like they have that sense of control in that dialogue as well, right? Because I feel like a lot of times maybe families get, something happened, maybe a fall happened, and family started to talk about it as if he or she is not there.
Hmm.
And I think that can also be really jarring and almost feel like very disrespectful for
Yes,
the parent as well, right? They wanted to feel like they have a say in the matter.
absolutely. Sherry, you're touching on such a good point. We want the best for our parents, right? And we mean the best. We are well intentioned, but sometimes we are unaware or insensitive to the loved one in the room,
Yeah.
right? If that discussion is happening,
Mm,
or if it's happening amongst the family, right? And your parent, your loved one isn't part of that. So I completely agree. It's so important to include them
mm,
and give them that sense of control and that sense of decision making and that sense, or at least a sense of input into the decision
mm,
making.
mm,
The other thing, though, about kind of navigating tricky dynamics with family and conversations is it can be very beneficial
mm.
to have a discussion with your sibling, if you have siblings, to
Yeah.
have a discussion with your siblings the next time you chat with them on the phone or dinner, whenever, whatever you might be seeing them about mom or dad,
Mm,
right? Because they can also help as well so that it's not on your shoulders,
yeah.
right? In Again, everyone has a different family dynamic, a different family situation, but bringing your siblings along for the ride, right? The earlier, the better, and collaborating with them, game planning with them, because they can also broach maybe the conversation with your parent from another angle at a different time so that your parent is having multiple discussions with multiple
Mm,
family members as well.
mm. And since you bring up the, having siblings and actually including them in the process, every families are different dynamic and there are different issues, right? And there could be some hidden issues amongst the siblings. And and I see a lot of examples out there where this is exactly the situation where siblings started to fall apart. They may come together or they may fall apart. Do you actually have any suggestions as to how to even talk to your siblings about this, even when you're not having the best relationship with them, but you need their help? Again, you don't want the responsibility to fall on yourself completely, but you need their help. But how do you navigate that conversation?
You can use plain language exactly how you just delivered it too, right? Sometimes it takes just our own courage to have a truthful and honest and forthcoming conversation, and being clear, right, can be very kind in the
Yeah.
words of Brene Brown, right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
yeah, and you don't necessarily have to, be best friends with your brother or your sister, but to say, "Hey, I observed this going on with mom or dad. Have you
Mm-hmm.
seen anything similar?"
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let them talk about that. Or I've been thinking about, mom and dad. I actually don't know if they have an estate plan in place, a will. Do you know anything about that?
Mm-hmm.
And see what they say. So there's many different angles of which to open the conversation about mom or dad and just see what they say and take it from there.
Mm-hmm.
And that can sometimes naturally lead to what do we do about this? Right? Or here's what I'm thinking, but I'd love to hear what you're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So approach it from kind of this open collaborative sense. And again, it also depends on geographic proximity to your parents.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps when you've maybe given it a little bit of thought toward, you know, what's your capacity or capability to help your
Mm-hmm.
mom or dad? What might be your siblings' capacity or capability to help them, and in what ways?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think there's many different ways to kind of like have the conversation, open it
Mm,
up, and kind of keep it going from that perspective.
mm. No, I love what you talked about. And I think the really important thing that you consistently have is be curious about what others, their input. So actually keep that conversation open, right? So it's not you trying to control the situation, but it's actually including everyone and have that conversation going. And I think that's so important. But it's often forgotten because in that kind of situation, a lot of times people wanted to have that sense of control. They wanted to just have a plan to just agreed on this. But that's really when you lose that sense of collaboration, like you said,
Yeah,
right?
it's true. And many of the conversational skills that you might employ with maybe your sibling or other family members, aunts, uncles, whomever, regarding your parents' care can draw from other principles of effective communication
Yeah.
and bringing others along. And when we allow people and enable people and invite them to give their opinion and weigh in on something, including our own parent, if we're having a conversation with them, it gives them a sense of ownership over the discussion or the decisions or what's going on, right? It really does. It creates the space for them to step in. And that's what we want to do because, even if maybe we, find ourselves as kind of the primary caregiver, the primary coordinator of our parents' things, it doesn't necessarily mean that all of everything needs to fall on us. What we cover and address a lot when I work with women in our program is how we can enable an ecosystem of support, whether that be through family members or people elsewhere in the community or their resources, to step in to provide that help and support and have a sense of ownership regarding the care of someone that they love or they know or they care about. And that's really critically important. The other thing too is kind of getting to maybe decision making or a plan. One thing that can be very helpful is presenting options for someone, right? So whether maybe you're talking with your mom or dad, or maybe you're having this discussion with your sibling, let's say, and you can say something like, well, I've thought about maybe, option A, option B, option A, pro and con, option B, pro and con, option C, pro and con. What do you think of these? Do you have an option D? Right. And so again, you're collaborating and you're kind of brainstorming and having dialogue.
Yeah, that is incredibly important. And like you said, there are a lot of communication technique out there that we think we're using in our lives, in our corporate life. But that's exactly the communication technique we can bring in to this kind of dynamic and also this kind of conversation.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I know that you do and really help women is to really speak for themselves to self-advocates. Especially, we all have a career. We have teams. We may be managers. We have a job that we have to earn a living. How do we do that? How do we self-advocate for ourselves in the corporate life, in the job as well, at the same time caring for aging parents?
Yes, it's a great question and a great topic. And it's something we address quite a bit in my program because women want to do the best they can for their parent in that role and responsibility. And they have a career that they've invested in and that they care about and that they want to continue to advance in, while they're grappling with these other responsibilities, even with, caring for children as well. Yeah. So we talk a lot about self-advocacy and the importance of advocating for yourself in the different settings and areas of your life. That's around managing your time and energy, how we have empowering affirmations and beliefs to help our mindset with that, and in setting boundaries as well. But in advocating for ourselves in the workplace, when we think about setting professional boundaries, they can help really protect your career advancement while honoring your caregiving responsibilities. And so things like workload boundaries or communication boundaries. So when I say workload boundaries, it can sound something like, I can take on this new project, but in order to maintain quality of my work or quality of the deliverables, I need to shift the deadline on another assignment or work deliverable. Right. So a lot of that is sort of communicating what I can and cannot do, managing expectations from that perspective. And then we talk about things like communication boundaries. So, let's say if you're, out of office. So for something like urgent matters when I'm out of the office, please text me rather than call or email.
Mm,
right? So again, it's about letting others know what is your preferred communication method? How can they
mhm,
get a hold of you? When are you available? When are you not available? That's really, really important. And that kind of melds all together around setting boundaries, setting and managing expectations for others
mm,
of ourselves, and in communicating, kind of what we need. But the other thing too is when we talk about another element, when we talk about advocating for yourself in the workplace, what we cover and what we talk about is how to really think about reframing our caregiving responsibilities as leadership, right? Not
mm,
as something that we're kind of trying to hide that happens over here in our personal lives or as like a burden, because so many women have so many skills. You're skilled at project management, you're skilled at stakeholder communication, you're skilled at, strategic planning, right? All of these skills that we develop in our professional lives. And if we really take a step back and think about it, navigating the world of elder care and complex senior systems and Medicare and
mhm,
Medicaid and housing and living arrangements
mhm.
and estate planning is doctors, care teams, medical
Yeah.
appointments, insurance companies, the list goes on. It is really complex project management with high emotional stakes.
Mm,
And the skills and the experience that we develop when we are navigating healthcare systems, coordinating logistics for our parents, advocating on behalf of our parents with
yeah.
complex situations make us stronger leaders in our companies and in our careers and in our work product. And so I encourage women to use that framing and that mindset in their
Mm,
workplace with their managers and their colleagues to convey how their elder care, caregiving
yeah.
responsibilities are an asset to their company and to their work product and to their work performance.
Mm. That is so beautifully said. And
Thank you.
it's a complete mindset change. And it's
It
so
really is.
important because if you, again, that is leadership, right? And if you
That's
see
right.
yourself as a leader in your life, it's not like I have to do this. It's because I get to do this and I get
That's right.
to make the plans and I get to project managing. I do think women are excellent project managers. It's it's like an innate ability that
We're
we
very
have.
we're very blessed to, I think, possess a fairly high level of organizational skills and communication skills and social emotional intelligence, right? And
Yeah.
so much of what I work with women on, and a lot of what they gain from this, is the mindset shifts and the
Mhm,
mindset reframing. Again, on how do I take this very challenging responsibility in life, something that's
mhm,
going on in my personal life, and what can I learn from it? What can I gain from it? What's the experience I'm getting? And how do I, from those components, and how do I leverage that in my workplace to advocate for myself in my career? In
mhm,
addition to coming from a place of enjoying of course, your relationship with your loved one, right, as they age and decline. But again, bringing, how do I think about what skills in my experience from this role over here? How does it translate into the workplace and into my career?
mm. That is incredibly important. And there are more and more people that started to kind of relate the parenting skills with leadership skills these days. But I think what you mentioned, it's the same thing.
It's very similar
Yeah,
in concept. Yes.
yeah, absolutely. So speaking of, we're in the sandwich age, and for all these professional women that have this responsibility or they get to take care of their aging parents, do you have any advices for them?
Yeah, I have, I mean, a couple of pieces. I would say probably my top three pieces of guidance for women who are, juggling demanding careers and caregiving responsibilities are, one, you cannot pour from an empty cup. You have to
Mm,
prioritize your own sustainability first, right? Just like they say on the airplane, right? Put your mask on first before you help someone else. And, many professional career women,
mhm.
highly ambitious, very driven, they exhaust themselves
Yeah.
trying to be the perfect caregiver, the perfect
Mhm.
daughter, while trying to maintain and advance their careers. And the guilt, while the guilt around kind of
Mhm.
setting boundaries and
Mm,
advocating for ourselves can be real, burnout helps no one.
yeah.
Burnout doesn't help your career. Burnout doesn't help yourself. Burnout doesn't help your relationships. Burnout doesn't help your parent. And so we have to really think about, what do we really need to sustain ourselves for our own well-being so that we
Mm,
can show up well for others in our lives that we care about and,
mm,
in our career.
mm. Yeah.
Because your career and your parents' care and well-being, and then again that relationship with your children, your spouse, depend on you being mentally and physically healthy. So we
Right.
have to be able to take even just a little bit
Mhm.
of time
Mhm.
for ourselves and for what matters to us and ourselves and our needs.
Mhm.
And my second piece of guidance is to build your support ecosystem and your knowledge, your know-how
Mhm.
around elder care before you desperately need it,
Mhm.
right? Like, don't wait until a crisis hits to research adult day programs, or like we were just talking earlier, having the tough conversations with siblings around sharing responsibilities, or having the hard conversations with your mom or your dad about, their long-term care needs or their wishes for end of life. I think that, again, high achieving women are used to handling everything themselves. And, you know, but then when they find themselves stepping into caring for an aging parent, navigating the world of elder care and all the complexities that come with that, it's really a whole new world. And it really does require seeking support and investing in knowledge so that we can navigate it effectively and so that it doesn't all have to be on us, right? We can play more of a quarterback role,
Mhm. Mm.
and learn how to do that too. And so what I recommend is that women really start taking action, right? Start mapping out resources, having family meetings or discussions, really reflecting on and thinking about which sort of like tasks or responsibilities related to mom and dad
Mm.
makes sense for me to maybe handle or be the lead on,
Mm.
and what other things could be delegated or outsourced to siblings, other family members, care team, the broader community.
Mhm.
That's really, really important, is developing that support ecosystem.
Mm. Right.
And then the third piece of advice goes back to advocating for yourself in the workplace and
Mm.
really being able to reframe caregiving as a leadership, a capability, rather than something sort of separate that's happening out in our personal lives that we're not translating experience from into our professional lives.
Mhm. And I think what's really important is just having the right mindset, the open mindset about this is something that we can actually plan and something that we can actually have a conversation about. It's not a situation where we kind of just have to do it because something happened.
That's right.
Right. And I think that is so important for a lot of us. And I think, to be honest, I think, I'm 42 and I'm in the sandwich stage where I have a young kid. I'm going to be caring for my parents, but also at the same time, we also have to juggle the perimenopause menopause situation, right? So it is complex, but at the same time, we do have information now, but it's a matter of, are we going to be proactive about it?
Yeah,
Right.
that's exactly right.
Mm.
And it's natural and normal
Yeah.
to put these types of things off because
Hmm.
there's a lot of uncertainty around them. Heck, we don't have time to take on
Yeah.
another responsibility in our lives, right?
Uh-huh.
But it is easy to think that way and to feel that way.
Uh-huh.
But when you find yourself, and inevitably people do, reacting to a crisis or being in a reactive versus a proactive or a planful state, it is incredibly painful.
Mm.
And you think, getting knowledge is time consuming. Just wait until you're dealing with a crisis emergency, right? And
Yeah.
have to take leave from work. It's incredibly time consuming and incredibly painful,
Hmm.
incredibly costly, really, from a financial perspective and really from an emotional and mental health perspective, too.
Hmm.
And what we want, right, is to really be able to focus on our relationship with our parent, the one that we love.
Hmm.
And the more that we can have plans in place, high level, some
Yeah.
options we've talked about, or started to just talk with siblings about it or our parent about it, right? A little bit. So even if we're not necessarily taking action against decisions, we've had
Hmm.
conversations that are going to set us up for making more straightforward decisions, maybe when that time does come. And so that type of planning and proactiveness pays dividends because what we want is to be able to focus on the human relationship
Yeah.
with our mom and our dad, right? The one that we love.
Hmm.
We don't want make hard decisions when we
Hmm.
haven't talked about them before, right? Those things get in the way
Yeah.
of the human relationship and the love and the fulfillment and the joy that we want to still experience with our
Hmm.
parent during their later and last stages of life. And so that's one way that I encourage women to think about it, where
Mm.
right now it's hard to plan, it's hard to think about this, don't have the time. You don't think you have the time or the money now, just wait till you're reacting to an emergency, right? And then you're really spending time and it's really costing you from multiple angles.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you said, it was so important. And I've seen a lot of people because they're so drained caring for aging parents while caring for their families and have a job, have a career. I think they still ended up feeling a bit guilty because they didn't get to really enjoy that time.
Their parent.
Yeah. And that's
Yes.
what you really want. That's why you wanted to be there and care for them, not because you absolutely have to. It's because, that's your time with your parents and you wanted to enjoy that. But don't let the burden, the all of that emergency, all of these hard decisions to take that away from you.
Yeah, it's so true. I will just kind of share on my own story around some of my sort of lessons learned from my experience with my own dad, how being unprepared really cost me. And it really cost my dad as well. It was very, very painful being in reactive mode because I didn't have the conversations I should have had with my dad prior to his decline in diagnosis. I didn't have those. And because my dad didn't plan, he lost his ability to have choice and control. Back to your, earlier comments about control, have choice and control around his living and care arrangements. And, for the whole family sort of lost control, if you will, over what was happening and the transitions we were experiencing. So it's like when you don't plan, you're almost guaranteed to lose control because things then just start happening to your loved one. Things start happening to your family. Choices and decisions are made for you, right? And we don't often think about it that way, but that is largely what happens. One of the other, lessons is that you're talking about, feelings of sort of guilt and regret. And it is important to have no regrets. The way to help have no regrets after our parent is no longer with us is to be more prepared and planful and proactive, again, so that we can focus on the relationship aspect, right? And really get the most out of their later and last stages of life so that these other things aren't in
Yeah.
the way of that,
Mm-hmm.
aren't in the way of the connection we have, with our parent.
And yeah, I think it's beautifully said. I feel like I could spend another 3 hours with you talking about this. This is so important.
It's such a deeply personal
It is.
topic, right? For everyone. Yeah. Because it deals
Absolutely.
with the person who raised us, who sacrificed for us, right? Who
Mm-hmm.
wants so much for us. And we naturally want to return the favor, right? But
Mm-hmm.
how do we do that in a way that meets their needs,
Mm-hmm.
but also respects our own needs,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that we can continue to thrive in our lives with our career and our demands. But again, have that relationship such that we have no regrets when they're no longer with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I cannot recommend your program enough because I think it's just such an important thing to be proactive and look at it in a different way. And especially so many leaders, I mean, all our listeners are leaders in the corporate world. Be a leader in your life, be a leader in this kind of situation as well. And one last question for you is because I asked this to all of my guests, their definition of soft power. But I already know your soft power, but I wanted to know what your soft power is and your definition of it.
Yeah. Soft power. I definitely think about the intersection of masculine and feminine energy. So that's one thing, but also taking it maybe to the context in which we've been talking, about stepping into elder care and aging parents. I think about, on one hand, how multiple truths can coexist. And so, on one hand, you can be unsure or, scared about, what's coming and, grieving the reality of the aging or decline or the mortality, right? The reality of the mortality of your parent. And at the same time, choose to experience the joy, the good times, the special moments with your parent while they're still here. So I think both of those sort of experiences and feelings and emotions can coexist.
Mm. No, I absolutely love that. Because I think it's because we think that it has to be one or another, or we have to be in complete control. And that's why there's so much guilt and shame to resent and regrets that comes along. But the thing is, yeah, like you said, they can coexist and it's okay to be scared and it's okay to feel whatever that you want it to feel, then how, all the emotion can exist, but also at the same time, you're also having a great time just spending time with your aging parents. But be curious about what else that's out there that I can ask for, and are there any resource? How do I advocate for myself? And I think it's also that
That's right.
concept of it's not selfish, but you're advocating for yourself. But a lot of
Yeah,
times we
that's
see
right.
that as selfishness, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's not selfish. Again, going back to my top number one piece of advice for women who are in this situation or very close to stepping in this situation, right? You can't pour from an empty cup. You have to prioritize your own sustainability. And when we prioritize ourselves, we then create the capability and the capacity mentally, emotionally, time wise, day to day, schedule wise to show up for others in our best version and in the way that we most desire to. So, really, we need to reframe it as win win.
Mm.
win for ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and a win for others.
Mm. Yeah. No, absolutely. I loved what you said about that as soft power. It is a win-win. And it
Win-win.
is about, again, recharged and actually filled your own cup first, and then you can serve to others. I feel like there's so much we could talk about, and I'm actually really looking forward to a part two of this, if you're okay
Good.
with that.
I am. I would love it. I would love it. Yes.
But thank you so much for taking your time and talk to me about, how to care for aging parents and how to feel empowered, because I certainly feel very empowered right now. And there are so many different things I get to ask my parents now.
Yeah, yeah, that's that is totally right. And I there's so much around this whole area of aging and decline and and stepping into these later and last stages of life and in dealing with end of life, and that can be unknown or seen in a negative light, right? Because it's a hard thing to deal with. It
Mm,
really can be. But again, as we've kind of talked throughout this conversation on some of these mindset shifts can be incredibly powerful,
mhm,
right? From a soft power perspective, incredibly powerful in how we navigate and thrive through this very challenging phase in our life and make the most of it
mm,
for the one we love, on behalf of our career, for our families, and for ourselves. And
mm.
so much of my vision,
Yeah.
and really the impetus for my business, the vision of my business and my practice and working with women, is to really ignite a profound shift in how we view one of
Mhm.
life's most important
Yeah.
and unstoppable transitions, right? The transition toward aging, decline, end of life, and the narratives and stories that we tell ourselves about aging, decline, end of life, and caregiving, and to help women rewrite the narrative of what it
Mhm.
means to care for aging parents, or to almost sort of rewrite their own mental narrative of what it means
Right.
to care while navigating our own lives. And
Mhm.
I help women see that this season isn't a detour from living, but it's
Mhm.
really a vital part of our life story and life's rich
Yeah.
tapestry, too.
Yeah. Absolutely. So actually, I will leave all of the information in the show notes, how you can find Kathleen, how you can find her programmed. And she actually offered a lot of free resource, which I actually downloaded
Great,
yesterday.
good.
So is there anything else that you like to tell our listeners about your program?
Just to share a little bit on it,
Yeah.
it's a group program course. It's called Caregiving From The Middle. And it is, specifically tailored for women that are caring for aging parents or getting close to that stage. And the program course is educational, coaching, and support based. And it brings together an innovative model of self-paced online learning modules and resources. So we have pre-recorded video lessons, downloadable workbooks, templates, resource guides. There's a lot to navigate in the world of elder care. So we have the lessons and the modules, and then we have a weekly live group coaching and community support call. So that
Hmm.
group component and getting together to get guidance from me and hear from the other women going through the program, I think is incredibly important. And there's access to an online community group forum for program members as well. And then access to me anytime for one-on-one expert guidance and support with me as the course facilitator to get help as you go through navigating and creating your elder care plan in the program. And that really is the overall deliverable and transformation through the time in the program. It's 12 weeks. Women chart their path and develop an elder care roadmap that's specific to their family situation so that they can navigate elder care, they can navigate this role without losing themselves. It's
Mm,
really
mm,
important. Yeah.
mm,
But
mm.
yes, include that in the show notes and my website and links to free resources and information about the program. It's very, very transformational, and it has just received incredible feedback and validation from women. And it's just been a remarkable resource for women.
Yeah. I really think the listeners have benefited so much from today's conversation, and I cannot wait for part two because there's actually a lot more that I wanted to ask you, including you actually have an assessment on what kind of caregiver are you? And that's so interesting, but I think that will definitely take up a big chunk of time. But that will be the part two. And yeah, thank
Love
you
it.
so, so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for the time, Sherry. I really appreciate the conversation. It's really been wonderful, and I will definitely look forward to a part two conversation.